Chapter 46, I Don't Love Her. After leaving the old mansion, Lu called Cheng Yizhou. I heard that you guys are going to provide support in the suburbs. Cheng Yizhou was busy gathering doctors and nurses at a private hospital. Hearing Lu's voice, he sighed in frustration. Yet, a serious mountain collapse happened in the neighboring city, causing a lot of deaths. Their local medical staff is overwhelmed, so they requested support from our city. Lu was on his way back to the Huading Manor. He turned on the Bluetooth mode and asked, "Is my wife also going?" Dr. Su Cheng Yizhou was puzzled. After thinking for a moment, he replied, "Wasn't it voluntary registration from Hualien Hospital?" Upon hearing this, Lu understood. She was probably going to the suburbs to support in order to avoid him. Cheng Yizhou didn't know about the situation between Lu and Su Wan Ci. Looking at the large number of medical staff gathered at the entrance of the private hospital, he complained, "If it weren't for me holding the title of dean, I wouldn't want to take on such a tough assignment." On the other side, ever since the day he saw Su Wan Ci at the hospital, Fu Jing Zhou hadn't been himself. He rarely visited the hospital and seldom appeared at the Fu Corporation. Fu Jingzhou's good friend, Li Huaichen, told Xinghang that Fu Jing Zhou hadn't been to the company for 2 or 3 days. Xinghang drove to the Starry Bay. Inside the empty villa, Fu Jing Zhou sat alone in front of the bar cabinet. There were 2 or 3 open bottles of Macallan whiskey in front of him. As Li Huaichen entered, a strong smell of alcohol hit him. Walking in, he saw Fu Jing Zhou, who seemed cold and sober despite the alcohol. Li Huaichen dropped his car keys on the side and sat across from Fu Jing Zhou. He initiated the conversation. "Jing Zhou, I heard your little sister-in-law married Lu." Fu Jingzhou's gaze flickered slightly. His expression remained unchanged. However, Li Huaichen noticed that his fingers holding the glass were gradually turning pale. "Jing Zhou, I've already told you before, hatred and affection can't coexist. 8 years ago, when you found her, I told you that you should have taken advantage of her sorrow and despair to drag her down into the mud, making sure she would never rise again. That would have avenged your father's bitter enmity, and everything would have ended. But Jing Zhou," Li Huaichen looked at the man drinking silently, and went straight to the point, "you were lenient back then. I've never understood over these years why you let her go abroad to develop. You have to understand, our power and influence are all within the country. Once she went abroad, she would completely be out of your control." Li Huaichen paused for a few seconds, then picked up a glass and poured himself a drink before continuing. "For all these years, you've loved and indulged her. You flew to her side every 2 or 3 months, no matter how busy the company was. You never missed a single one of her birthdays, regardless of how busy you were, you always went to be with her. I thought that through these years of getting along, you had already let go of your hatred." Fu Jing Zhou downed a glass of alcohol, the struggle in his eyes becoming apparent. He said, "Huaichen, I've thought about it many times, spending the rest of my life with her. But I can't let go of the hatred." Every time he saw Su Wan Ci, he couldn't help but think of her father. He thought of how, due to her father's greed, his own father lost his life. But you can't let her go either, can you? Jing Zhou, that's why you're in so much pain now. It's because in your heart, you can't let go of both the hatred and Su Wan Ci." Li Huaichen looked down, a trace of regret flashing in his eyes. "Jing Zhou, as your brother, I have to remind you, there's never a perfect solution in this world. If you insist on choosing revenge, then you have to let go of your feelings for her. If you can't tolerate her leaving, if you can't tolerate her being with another man, then forget about your hatred and take her back from Liu. After Li Huaichen finished speaking, Fu Jing Zhou didn't say anything for quite a while. Just as Li Huaichen thought he was seriously considering his suggestion, Fu Jing Zhou suddenly spoke, "I don't love her." Li Huaichen raised his eyebrows in surprise, then the next second, he heard Fu Jing Zhou say, "I just can't accept the fact that the girl I raised for 8 years married someone else without a word." Li Huaichen looked at Fu Jingzhou's expression. After a while, the surprise on his face faded, and he shook his head with a light smile. Indeed, emotions were perplexing for those involved. "Jing Zhou, if you really don't love her, you wouldn't be hesitating right now." Fu Jingzhou's eyelids twitched slightly. Li Huaichen continued, "If you don't love her, you only need to use the power of the Fu family to ruin her. Why wait until she confesses her love to you and tear everything apart then?" Li Huaichen and Fu Jingzhou had been friends for over 20 years, so they understood each other very well. Li Huaichen had witnessed the bits and pieces of Fu Jingzhou and Su Wan Ci's relationship over the past 8 years. Therefore, he understood Fu Jingzhou's thoughts better than anyone else. "Jingzhou, over these 8 years, you had countless opportunities for revenge, yet you chose to do it when she came back to the country and left everything behind for you. Jingzhou, you're gambling. You're gambling on her feelings for you, gambling on her love for you. You're betting that no matter how you torture her, she won't leave you easily." However, what surprised everyone was that the young girl had such a fiery temperament. She would rather marry a stranger on a whim than be controlled and imprisoned by Fu Jingzhou. Seeing Fu Jingzhou's expression loosening, Li Huaichen concluded, "Jingzhou, you need to think carefully and quickly about which you will choose, revenge or feelings. If you choose feelings, while Su Wan Ci still loves you, while Liu hasn't yet fallen for her, try to take her back. Otherwise, if this continued, by the time Liu fell in love with Su Wan Ci, even if Fu Jingzhou regretted it, it would be too late." Huading Manor. Liu asked Cheng Yizhou for the location in the suburban area of the neighboring city and was about to find his wife. But his mother arrived again. Seeing Liu getting ready to go out with his keys, Yuan Ruoshu asked him, "Where are you going?" "To bring your daughter-in-law back." Upon hearing this, Yuan Ruoshu raised her eyebrows. She glared at her son, pushed him into the living room, and said, "Come in." On the sofa, Mrs. Liu patiently advised, "Liu, remember, Wan Ci lost her parents at a young age. In this big city, she doesn't have any relatives to rely on for warmth. Wan Ci lacks love and affection. If you want her to stay with you for a long time, you mustn't force it. Forcing someone to stay by your side won't make them stay forever. Isn't Fu Jingzhou an example?" Liu naturally understood this principle. He looked at his mother and asked, "Did you come all the way here just to say this? Your mother is worried that you'll lose your daughter-in-law." Liu was in a hurry to see Su Wan Ci. He interrupted Yuan Ruoshu and said, "I understand, Mom. You can go back and nag Dad. I need to see my wife urgently." Yuan Ruoshu stood up and watched Liu's figure. Not feeling reassured, she issued a warning. "Let me tell you, you brat. If you can't bring my daughter-in-law back, you'll be kicked out of this house." Liu threw back a comment, "That would be a pity, considering you only have one son. If she kicked him out, who would inherit the family business unexpectedly?" Mrs. Liu replied coldly, "Too bad, we'll just donate everything, become philanthropists."